So, good afternoon. I've got a couple of announcements, as usual, before we begin. Firstly, lost property. We found a Microsoft cell phone. Does this belong to anyone? Well, if it does, it'll be here at the front of the room. And we found also this very fetching winter hat. Does this belong to anyone? Well, again, if you find anyone who's lost a winter hat, it's here at the front of the room. Some announcements about transport. The buses will be going to your hotels and to Tamel if you're going on the excursion, 5 minutes following the end of this session. So please go straight out to the buses when the session finishes, which we hope it'll do by 5:30. Also, relating to the Tamel trip, the drop-off place in Tamel will also be the pick-up place, and you need to be at that drop-off pick-up place by 8 o'clock sharp. If you don't make it by 8 o'clock, the bus will go, and I'm afraid you'll have to get a taxi. Next then. Many people have not yet claimed their expenses. If you put in a claim yesterday, your claims, thanks to the hard work of the ICIMOD Finance Department, are ready. So please do collect them from the finance desk at the end of this session, or during the session even. Also, I have messages for 4 people. Dr. Sunil Baram. Can you please contact reception in the main building of ICIMOD? There's been a telephone call for you, apparently. And could the following people please contact the finance desk? Saad Abbas, Arjuman Nizami, and Shah Alam. Could you all contact the finance desk? I believe they have some money for you. Okay, so let us move on to this afternoon's plenary session, and this is a reality check, implementation challenges in achieving gender-responsive and socially inclusive transformative change. And in order to introduce the session and say a little bit about it, I'd like to welcome onto the stage the session hosts, Janita Gurung and Suman Bisht. Round of applause, please.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome everyone to the last plenary of day 3 of the conference on developing solutions towards a sustainable future for Asia. Now, every time we talk of sustainability, a frame of reference is obviously provided by the Sustainable Development Goals that we offer to contributed to her present work on gender equality, human rights, and development issues. We are honored to have you chairing our session today. And please accept this token of appreciation. Now, I will also call upon our other panel members to take their seats on the stage. And in doing so, I request our session chair to present them this token of appreciation for your time and for sharing your time and your knowledge with us today. So first, I would like to call upon Dr. Leena Srivastava, Terry School of Advanced Studies. Mr. Honorul, Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. Dr. Hari Krishna Upadhyay, Center for Environment and Agricultural Policy Research, Extension and Development, CPRID. Ms. Yankila Sherpa, Trans-Himalayan Environment and Livelihood Program. And Ms. Freshta Ibrahimi, Ascent Leadership Through Athletics. And now I hand over the session to our chair.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this very important and interesting conference on resilient Hindu Kush Himalaya. It is an honor to be here. It's an opportunity to learn a lot, and I have really enjoyed the conference so far. I am also very pleased that so much on gender equality has already been discussed. And I am particularly glad to be sharing this session on reality check, implementation challenges in achieving gender responsive and socially inclusive transformative change. Gender equality supports better and more sustainable development and resilience. There is a clear link between gender equality and peaceful and democratic societies. Research shows that more gender equal societies are strongly connected to peace both within countries and with neighboring countries. And at the same time, gender equality is catalytic to economic development and for fighting poverty, as it allows societies to unlock the full potential of their people. Gender transformative change and processes of empowerment are ultimately about transforming unequal power relations and the structures and norms that uphold them. I am proud to represent the Swedish government because Sweden is the first feminist government in the world. There is a focus on gender equality, both in national, regional, and international work. Women and men must have equal power to shape society and their own lives. Ultimately, this is a question of human rights, democracy, and justice. The basis for this can be summarized in 3 words, all starting with an R: rights, representation, and resources. Rights and respect for human rights and the rule of law constitutes a central role in every discussion on gender. And this includes the promotion of the full enjoyment of human rights by all women and girls, including by combating all forms of violence and discrimination that restrict their freedom of action. Representation. Women, as well as men, should be able to participate and influence in all decision-making at all levels and in all areas. And resources. Women and men should have equal access to available resources. And in order to achieve gender equality and to change perceptions about women and men, girls and boys, and persons with other gender identities, it is crucial that men and boys engage and are included in gender equality work. Gender equality is by default about relations and about changing power relations and challenging stereotypes, ideas about the role of women, girls, men and boys. Many men, especially those who do not live up to the heteronormative ideals of masculinity, also suffers from consequences of the lack of gender equality. So what are we trying to change? We need to change women and men's consciousness, informal cultural norms and exclusionary practices. We need to change women's access to resources and opportunities, and we need to change the formal laws and policies. So now I'm very eager to hear from our panelists the advice on how to do and to give us a reality check. And the first question is for... Thank you. The first question, that is implementation challenges in achieving gender-responsive and socially inclusive transformative change through policy, goes to Dr. Lina Srivastava, who is the Vice Chancellor of the Energy and Resource Institute in New Delhi. She has worked for over 3 decades on research in the area of energy, environment, climate change policies. and she is serving on several boards and advisory panels in both private companies and other organizations. She is, for example, an advisor to the ADB president on climate change and sustainable development, and she is also a board member at Stockholm Resilience Center. Please.
Thank you very much. As you may have heard from the introduction, I have not done too much work on gender, although I represent possibly one of the genders that we're talking about, key gender. I wanted to start with a confession on this and the fact that I don't really have any prepared comments, but I do have some thoughts. It would have been easier for me to talk about the challenges that we face at a national level in corporate boardrooms and other committees, and those challenges are pretty hard by themselves. So when we start talking about challenges at a grassroots level, then the situation becomes that much more complex. To me, when I looked at the question that we were posing in this session, implementation challenges in achieving gender responsive and socially inclusive transformative change, the thought came to mind that and then I'd like to pose this to you, that are we asking the wrong question? Because when we talk about gender responsiveness or even socially inclusive policies, I think we need to recognize that both of these are in given contexts. And when we are talking about those contexts, the question that comes to mind is responsiveness to whom? Is it the people on the ground? Or is it those of us who are working with the people on the ground and bringing about a change? And if it is the former, then that context itself and the ambition can be fairly limited. And if it is those of us who are working with them on the ground, then again, I think there are certain boxes that we have to draw around the problem for us to be able to solve it and to be able to show that the impact that we have. So as an approach, we possibly tend to take incremental approach to bringing about changes in both these domains, and that was the first kind of thought that came to mind. And I was looking at examples from other areas that could also serve to illustrate this. Whether you look at electrification or water access, which are two very important things for women in particular in rural areas and in mountain areas. The definitions of electrification, of access to water have evolved over a period of time, but still do not mean 24/7 access in your homes without having to undergo any effort for women in particular. So while this kind of access reduces drudgery, but as I said, it does not necessarily open doors to a more equal status in various kinds. So it's a very important part of gender responsiveness if we are able to provide all these services that involves alleviating from drudgery, but not the only part of the solution. So I would then, possibly want to say that in addition to this kind of a responsive approach, which is kind of a push that is being given, there also needs to be some pull factors that has to come from the top. And these pull factors could possibly be in more of a rights-based approach, as you mentioned, with accountability, and critically important that that this whole framework is accountability is an equally important part of gender responsiveness and social inclusion. But in addition, again, to that as well, I believe that there have to be incentives for participation of women in the economic workforce. And if these incentives do not exist, then once again, the pullback from other parts of society can be pretty strong. So if I take again an example to illustrate, in India, we have this wonderful program to provide employment to rural areas. It's a long name, but basically it's an employment guarantee scheme. Can we think about making this employment guarantee scheme much more attractive for women and those from socially backward classes to, as compared to the normal men and other people. So can we create those kinds of incentives that would actually, in addition to the push that we are creating from empowering people, also create this pull? So that was another thought that came to mind for creating these opportunities. I don't know if you want to talk about barriers, but barriers are obviously many. We really have to be careful in a sense, because in our enthusiasm to bring about this change, very often, if we haven't prepared the ground evenly, then we could create a lot more social disruption than we are able to handle. And the social order can come under question. So that was, being able to work with both the genders equally, men and women, in bringing about this transformative change is going to be critically important. There's also a huge need for education and awareness, not at the grassroots level, but at the top, at the policy level, because the people who are making laws, the institutions that determine how we function on a day-to-day basis are all male-dominated. And it's very, very difficult for us to get them to change and to accept the kind of change that we want to see coming about in the world. So again, if I take India as an example, we have been struggling to have a 30% representation of women in parliament, and it still hasn't happened. That bill is not been able to go through. So how do you bring about those kinds of changes at the top that will also signal all the pull effects that we want all the way down is itself a challenge. My time is up. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting thoughts. And I'm sorry, I didn't say that the panelists have 6 minutes each. So, okay. So the same question then goes to Mr. Honorul, who is the General Manager of the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. And Mr. Roel has been working for the Netherlands Foreign Services and the World Bank for more than 20 years. But he has recently switched sides, or switched organization, maybe not sides, but switched organization, because he now wants to work much more on implementation than on policy. Please.
Thank you very much. It's perfectly okay to say I switched sides, because I did want to work more on getting the token woman on a panel. It's a very important point, because in development, for the first 2 decades of my career, I always heard, I either didn't hear about women, or I heard about needing to think about women and other minorities, if you remember that phrase. And I always thought, what is that? Because women aren't actually minorities. And then I realized that the people who made up those phrases in boardrooms, parliaments, governments, actually ended up thinking women were minorities, because there are very few women that they ever saw. This is, by the way, one of the most gender balanced, or it's probably even gender unbalanced group that I've ever seen in a conference, which is a great testimony to ICIMOD. Very, very important point to me. I believe we need social disruption. I believe the state of the world is such that, and by the way, I'm not saying this on behalf of the World Bank or the Aga Khan, although I believe the Aga Khan believes some of these things himself, but I really do believe the state of the world is such that incremental change is not enough, and I believe there's ample reason to believe that the underrepresentation of women in decision-making is a significant reason for what I would call the deplorable state of the world today. Because we're talking about transformational change, and I don't believe you can achieve transformational change in overall policy making, ignoring the need for radical change in gender relationships, which is why we should have feminist governments, which is why I believe 30% is too few for women parliamentarians, but it would be a lot better than no bill at all to say that. Because the impact of who makes the decision is huge. I then believe that if you go to institutions, you see that in many institutions, women have better opportunities to come to decision-making positions than they had in the past. But they still do that in essentially male-dominated institutions with male-dominated values. And you see that many women, and I say this with some trepidation, end up feeling like they need to behave like men to make it to the top. And that actually takes away from the very value of having women in these positions, because the value of having women, to me, is not in rights. Rights are very good, by the way. It's in the fact that they think differently, have different perspective, and make different contributions from a different point of view. And that therefore the conditioning in managerial behavior that is often necessary to make it to the top, and I've seen some bosses of mine who behaved that way in the past, I believe are very important obstacles. And I think therefore there's a need to rethink managerial and leadership values from that perspective. Now the next thing we heard the last decade was always to think about women as beneficiaries. And again, I've got nothing against women benefiting from programs. And if you go to the posters outside, you see that most of the programs actually target women more than they target men as beneficiaries. But I still think it misses the point. I think the most important point to realize is that women should be thought of as primary actors of change, not as beneficiaries. Because, again, women think differently. If you think about resilience and you think about saving the world, literally speaking, all of us know, all men know, not even the biggest macho would deny that girls and women are more careful about their stuff than men. They are differently inclined in terms of how they deal and balance with their environment. And I therefore believe it's important to realize that by building programs on women, you actually get different programs and different results. And again, the state of the world gives me every right to assert that if you flip the perspective 100%, you might just get a better result. I actually believe that women will be generous enough to give men still 50% of the parliament seat because they are actually more sensible than men. Because as a manager, I always also learned, and I'm generalizing, but I'm generalizing on a very large number of observations, that women are actually better, more disciplined, more productive, and more creative employees than men on average. So what do I mean by that? In the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat, we try to warn people when avalanches are coming so that they can save their lives. And we do that in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Tajikistan, and we wonder why every year there are people who didn't listen. So last year we had the best performance ever, predicting every single avalanche, but we still had people dying because they didn't heed the warnings. And guess what we discovered? The channel that transfers the warnings is all through men. Now, how can you believe that you can actually influence a family's behavior by communicating only through men? Women are clearly the more suitable, and this is a traditional example, but it's a real example from the field. You need to talk to women first if you want behavior to change. So, basically, the more I've worked in development, the more I've realized that we look at everything upside down, that we should realize that men have had 40,000 years to show they can manage the world, and they have achieved a lot, but by and large failed in creating a world that we can be proud of and believe has a viable future. So if we want transformational change, we need to transform the role of women in decision making. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, we heard twice now that incremental change is not enough. And I think that is very true. The next question, that is implementation challenge in achieving gender responsive and social inclusive transformative change through development programs, goes first to Mr. Hari Krishna Upadhyay. And Mr. Upadhyay is a founder and executive chairperson of ICIMOD, which is one of the largest and most well-known professional NGOs of Nepal, specialized in high-value commercial agriculture. He has been publicly honored for his contribution to rural poverty reduction through ICIMOD. Please.
Thank you. I am often accused of making things simpler than they are. And in so doing, I'll try to do that here also in terms of what my understanding of transformative change is. To me, transformative change comes when you address the root structural causes of the problem rather than merely attacking the symptoms. What that means in terms of gender responsiveness and social inclusion is you're basically tackling or addressing the power relations and structures that deny the freedom and choice for women and for other excluded communities in the society. So, I mean, you know, transformative change happens when women and other excluded communities have freedom to choose what they want to be, what they want to do, and the kind of life they want to live. So it's basically a state of empowerment, not only on the part of women and, you know, excluded communities, but also on the part of the others, especially showing empathy, not sympathy, towards women and towards the excluded communities. So in essence, it's a struggle to fight the age-long traditions, cultures, behaviors that have been deep-rooted in our day-to-day life system. Now, with that in background, I'll briefly touch on the challenges that I see in terms of bringing about transformative change through development programs. The challenges actually not only stem from the implementation deficiencies, but also in terms of how we design the programs. Many development programs have been designed with a very project approach, more, you know, they don't, I mean, naturally because of lack of resources, time, and others, they can't afford to go open-ended. So they have to be more close-ended, very limited focus, and then limited time, which goes, you know, towards solving specific issues or problems that the project has been aiming at. So while on the one hand we talk about structural changes, structural causes that have long been deep-rooted in the society, how could we possibly expect a project to, you know, to tackle those, to address those long-drawn, you know, causes of the problem? Also, as I said, the time frame, you know, projects are at best short to medium term, 3 to 5 years, and it takes reasonably long time for people to change their behaviors, to change their orientation, to change their attitude. And then oftentimes, you know, the projects do not really see how the entry and exit strategies are defined, which often do not, you know, which often leave the, you know, development, if at all there is any development towards moving to the transformative change, they leave the development at somewhere in the middle, and, you know, letting the project come back to its original stage. Now, finally, there's also this notion of quick impact. We often tend to design projects to generate quick impact, you know, in 2, 3, or 4 years' time. And this transformative change, which means addressing the long-run, you know, causes, cannot happen in, you know, in such a short time. So that's about the, you know, some of the design challenges, you know, and then there are implementation challenges, some of which are, you know, mainly relating to the target-specific, you know, approach, problem-specific targeted approach. And there are, of course, external factors, you know, cultural, religious, legal, policy. These the external factors that affect. Even if projects are, you know, designed properly, implementation is being affected by those factors. Now, can we do anything then? I mean, does it mean that we can't really bring about any transformative change? I think yes, we can still think about bringing some transformative change, provided, you know, we consider 3 things. This is based on, you know, on our experience of over 2.5 decades from the ground. First, of course, the legal policy and regulatory environment. Any discriminatory policies that exist have to be, you know, tackled. So the policies provide a necessary condition. Anti-discriminatory policies provide a necessary condition to transformative change, but not sufficient condition. And then 2 other things that I think are important are, first, you know, as I said, transformative change means empowerment of women and, you know, disadvantaged group or whichever groups are excluded. But empowerment is not only, although understanding that empowerment is not only economic empowerment, we've seen that economic empowerment actually leads to other forms of empowerment over the years. So if you start with economic empowerment, livelihood, the better livelihood and wider livelihood options for the poor, then this eventually leads to other forms of empowerment. And the third is human-centered implementation approach, which means, an approach that involves social mobilization, meaning, letting people know their collective action and opportunities. Second, developing their capacity to implement those actions. And third, organizing them into some form of organization or institutions, which increases their confidence and organized capability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will now turn to our fourth panelist, and after that we will have a question and answer session, and then finally we'll have our fifth and last panelist. But first, Mrs. Jankila Sherpa. She's the Vice President of Trans-Himalayan Environment and Livelihood Program in Nepal, immediate past President of Federation of Women Entrepreneurs of Nepal, and past President of Trekking Agents Association of Nepal. She has served her country in the capacity of State Minister and Assistant Minister for Culture, Tourism and Civil Aviation. She also served as a Member of Parliament of the Upper House of Nepal from 2001 to 2007. Please.
Thank you for having me here also to express my points. This is a reality check, so I think I'm going to be speaking some real facts that exist in this part of the world, Nepal. When we talk about the development programs and the challenges that are faced in bringing transformative change in gender and social inclusion, number one, I think we should look at the planning phase and the policy making. I'm really talking about the context of Nepal. Policies and plans are made at the highest executive level, Cabinet, Ministry of Finance, and the National Planning Commission. How many women and socially excluded people are represented in these institutions? We can hardly count. And if any included, do they really understand gender and social inclusion, transformative change? Are they able to get it through? For example, women in the cabinet, are they able to voice out these issues, and are they able to get it through? I've just jotted down some points. For example, women are represented in a minimal as a token. National Planning Commission, which is the most important unit in Nepal, which makes the plans for the development in Nepal. There's hardly a woman there. In forming the National Planning Commission, gender and social inclusion is hardly ever taken into account. And another important phase is that the actual thing is that when these development policies and programs are made, women at the grassroots are never ever consulted. The issues, their issues, women in the grassroots, their issues that need to be addressed to achieve gender responsive, socially inclusive change, their development needs are not even studied at all when these plans and programs are designed. So development plans should be made at the bottom and not at the top, which is actually happening in our part of the world. Then I'm coming to the part of the execution level of the development programs. The challenge at the planning phase, and then the challenge at the execution level. Now, development programs are normally undertaken by government organizations, GOs, NGOs, INGOs. And a lot of the development funds, I'm sorry, are spent in big seminars, workshops, and research works. By the time it reaches the grassroots level, I'm sorry to say this, it's a trickles have been always very important. How many attended the training? And not what kind of training and what effect, what impact? Did they learn? Or did they learn what they really need to bring a change in their livelihood skills? So, and of course, there's no follow-up. There's no follow-up, no continuity. I'm sorry, I may be quite blank in my statements. And as quantity and not the quality. Did men and women's lives change after, example, a training? This is not taken into consideration. And I'm talking really facts from Nepal. And now we have been talking about women's empowerment in Nepal, and we have a woman president, and that's taken as a wonderful thing to tell feminist women, look, this is what has been given to you. But issues that bring transformative change is hardly ever spoken at the podium. I'm sorry, maybe sometimes, and women do speak at the podium. I've had the opportunity to, but women's issues are not listened to. They are not paid attention. Many people go to sleep or walk out of the podium. So that's what I've talked about Nepal. I'm sorry, I might be very forthright with my statements about the reality in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all. I think the lot of thoughts. I the floor for panelists. Any questions? There is one.
I think very thoughtful presentation from the Minister. I just wanted to say, particular countries would have either a prime minister or president. So is it a plus? I think. If you all read, I think none of the countries probably have. Both our positions are occupied by.
Gender equality comes in, whether it's at the lower levels with violence and tension in the home, or at higher levels. I'd like to hear about ideas of how you approach men and create incentives for them to join these programs.
And another question? Over there.
May I?
Yes, this gentleman.
I have one question because Dr. Hari has made it clear what is transformative change. It's about attacking the root cause, structural problem. So it's revolved around empowerment, which is both a process as well as the outcome. But the fundamental question that comes immediately to my mind is whether we are seeking equality of opportunity or equality of outcome. So this is the questions, because unless we or to what extent there is a synergy, whether we can attain equality of opportunity by achieving equality of outcome or other way around. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is Parvez Babul, journalist from Bangladesh. I think the scenario of violence against women or discrimination more or less same among the HK's regional countries. And there is misconception, I think, and misbelief that women are second-class citizens in many countries. And it's a matter of changing the mindset of some of men. Women are equal, like men. So these types of beliefs should be established in the society. So how to change the mindset of those type of men? They still carry the negative mindset. Women are second-class citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we take some answers now and then maybe go for another round of questions afterwards? Yes. So who would like to take on how do we incentivize? Yeah? Yes, please.
There was a question about, the rest of Southeast Asia or South Asia not having a woman president or a prime minister. Currently, we have one. What I mean to say is I'm really coming to the reality thing that this session is all about, How much is having a president at the top level helping to bring a gender responsive and socially transformative change as much as a woman at the executive level would do. That's what I meant to assert here, if that helps to answer your query.
I think I had one query relating to whether we're talking about equality in terms of outcome or equality in terms of opportunities. Actually, essentially you need to have equality of opportunities as well. Otherwise you can't have equality of outcome. So it's basically fundamentally ensuring that women like men get equal opportunities in terms of access to resources, in terms of decision making, and in terms of every other walks of life. That's what I meant.
So I wanted to react to the question about involving men, which is obviously very, very important. So first of all, the mechanism, the basic mechanism is a very brutal biological mechanism from a long time ago. Men are physically stronger, so they've learned how to exploit women and actually cause women to do most of the hard work, despite the fact that it started with men being stronger. And that's the exploitative relationship that exists. Now, based on that, there's a whole series of ideals and projections about men, what men are supposed to be in society and what women are supposed to be in society. And in the Netherlands,
from China, I don't work on in gender equality. It's always focusing on the inequality side and portraying women as a opposite side to a major wave of society development. But then reflecting on my work on water, in the past we also portraying environment issues as an opposite side, enemy towards economic development. That is wrong, because if you look at the environment movement in China over the past 10 years, the transformation change happened in recent years when the government realized you cannot alienate environment from the economy. You have to think about the policy making altogether to actually trigger the change in the private sector. So I think this country will maybe more effort need to put on actual actions can help the women to grow and provide actual support rather than just voicing the inequality, putting them in the opposite side of the society. Thanks.
Yes, the next question is...
Namaste, I am Mika Tuladar and I work with Central Bank to channelize more fund to priority enterprise sector lending. Thank you, Yankila Sharpa Madam, for a very encouraging and energizing presentation. And it would be completely incomplete for me and for us to have a takeaway after listening to not so good a scenario and my question is, how can we, if in such scenario, can accelerate and improve the current gender inequality situation in Nepal? Thank you very much.
It's me? At the back.
I actually have a comment more than a question, and maybe that can draw some reactions from the panel. To the comment that Leena ma'am made about whether we as a society are ready or not, I personally would like to think that I think the women are ready. It's just that the other gender is not. For example, if I was to say something in a meeting or a conference or something, that would have a very different impact as opposed to the same thing said by maybe a male colleague of mine. So I think the women are ready. It's just that the men, the kind of backgrounds they come from, the kind of culture that they belong to, maybe the thinking that they still hold, is not ready to see women in certain roles that they have seen men hold so far. And the other thing about having male and female role models that Ono sir said, and I would like to say that I think even when women do hold leadership positions, it's very important for them to then extend some kind of a support system to women who are in positions that are under them, and have women actually support other women as well. So would like to hear something on that.
Again, it's almost similar to what Novedita said. It's to Dr. Leena Srivastava. And you said you're not ready for change. So do we wait for change? I mean, doesn't it get too late? Change happens. So I don't think we should wait for change. But what's your take on that? Yeah.
Okay, who wants to start off? Yes?
We have a young lady here in the middle with a question. She said, how can we improve the gender situation in Nepal? For example, I think education and awareness at the grassroots level where the development program is to be launched. Awareness is so very important for both men and women at the grassroots. For example, to empower women, women should be encouraged. What happens is in a session, for example, in a training session at a village level, woman is making a statement, then a man comes in between and says, she means to say that, He is more emphatic, and she's, so I think that makes the woman feel that, am I not articulate enough? So he has to help me to put my points forward. So I think, things like these need to be looked into, a lot of, and then another point that I would like to make here for, again, I'm talking about Nepal's context. I think women and men need to be given trainings, awareness programs, educational programs at these levels, rather than, I remember during the earthquake, a lot of money and a lot of goods came in. I don't think that was much of a help, as much as if we gave them livelihood skills, how to start sewing, how to start selling, how to market. All these important things were not looked into. So these are some things, if they are looked into seriously, could help the gender empowerment. I really believe in women's economic empowerment at the grassroots level. I'm involved with the Federation of Women Entrepreneurs, where we empower women in business development. We give them a package where we teach them not only just to make a pickle, we also teach them how to do a business management, how to do accounting, how to market, and then we consult with the local bodies. And these are little small initiatives that some organizations are doing. So I think these would be helpful in empowering gender. Thank you. I hope I tried.
Thank you very much. Diana?
Yeah, so women are ready. I would not want to argue with that. Women are ready and they are capable. But the question is, are they willing to fight? And it does require a fight, I think, as Madam Sherpa just mentioned. So I was talking to some of the industry colleagues that I come across, and they had a major program on women in the workforce. And this gentleman was really struggling. He says, I want the women employees to become managers. And we were talking about research-based industry. And he says, but they're not willing to come forward and take on managerial roles because it does not go with their roles at home. So, you really, there is, when we are talking about being, similarly when you talk about parliamentarians as well, you are there in parliament, whether it is in the upper house or local or lower house, in equal terms. What is to stop you from actually speaking up and making your voice heard? You again have to stand up and fight and be aggressive and match up to the aggressiveness that is shown by men, but we are not ready. So when we talk about women being ready, I think it needs to be nuanced as well, and along with the women, the men also have to be ready, and that's why, one was emphasizing the need for education and awareness to be created. And you can't blame the men as well, because they have been taught, as Ono said from the word go, that they have a certain role in society, in homes, etc. And they're living up to that role responsibility, and nobody's telling them otherwise, and we're not sending any signals. So I think that's where the problem is, and it also links to what Bikash, who was sitting next to you, mentioned about whether we need equal opportunity or equal outcome. Equal opportunity works when every other part of the playing field is also equal. When that is not, then it's not going to result in the outcome that we want.
So, there was this question about a partnership between men and women. So I'm afraid that if you see a long-standing partnership and you see one side of the partnership getting between 99 and 80% of the benefit for 1,000 years, you have to conclude that it's not truly a partnership. It's not because all men are bad or all women are good. That's not at all the point. It's all about conditioning and how the relationship works out. I really do believe that we need to do some revolutionary engineering to some basic issues. There's the issue of representation and power and agency. It's not about constitutional rights. Those are generally speaking there, except in the most hideous situations. I believe it's really important to push the issue of women in the workplace and women in management. Because why can men afford to put all the workload on the women? Because they can assert that their career is more important than their wives. And it leads to them loading off 90% of the workload in India, for instance, about 75% in Western Europe, supposedly very enlightened. If women really were in important careers in much larger numbers, the equilibrium at home would be different. And that requires, I think, some social engineering. I think it would be great if one development agency said, for the next X months or years, whatever, only women are going to design development programs aiming to benefit men. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? It's just that development worked like that for 70 years the other way around. So it may actually not be so ridiculous. I believe we need to do some things that force change, even if it's disruptive, uncomfortable, and maybe at the individual level not so productive. Because I don't believe it's just a matter of building a nice, equal, cozy partnership. That even doesn't work at home all the time.
Thank you very much. We have to continue now, and I will now turn to Freshta Ibrahimi, who will give us the youth perspective. Freshta is originally from Bamyan. She's a graduate of the Business Management School from the American University of Afghanistan. Freshta is working with an NGO called Ascend, leading women climbers and a women climbers team in Afghanistan. She has actually climbed 5,516 meters. That is no other Afghan woman have climbed that before. She's the chief executive of the youth committee called Voice of Peace, and she has a lot of other things on her bow as well. But I give the floor to you now, Freshta.
Thank you so much. Namaste. It's a great honor to be here talking about what I do and how I am a change now. I'm coming from a country that has been recognized as one of the safest country in the world. And this is the reason that citizens makes the life hard for them to live, and traveling and staying hard for internationals especially. Those who have been in Afghanistan or maybe their friends, they may have heard that there are still positive things happening in Afghanistan. It's not always war. And I met them here. They changed. They had dreams. You know, they were telling, first, we want to be professional mountain climbers. We want to come for Everest. We want to go for Naushak. Why that happened? Why they were here? It is because Everest is here. Everest is a mountain. That is why mountain matters. And that is why today I'm here. Mountains are leading us. We are just like friends. When I was thinking that how I am today here, it's because I came to answer that it's because of the mountain. It is getting me here because mountain was important. I came to be mountaineer, and from last year program, I decided that I can bring change through a sport of mountaineering in my country. So why not? And I am here today to talk. We can think broader. Why not Asia, this region? Women, why we don't think about women climbers in Asian region? This is, I want from the related people here that these work really relate to them, to help this group of women to come together, to share their common experience and come for a solution. We need more voices, and women climbers, they're a voice. They can be the voice. This group of women, they deserve to be leaders. They deserve to be expedition leaders. They can, and they really deserve to take part for growth of their economy and be independent, be role models and be leaders. This is what I always to the team I tell them that it's not always politicians can be leaders, it's athletes, they can be leaders. As when you inspire a person, you are a leader. Just recently I came with a quote. I want to just share it with you. It says, actually the author and poet is Najwa Zibian. Those mountains you were carrying, you were only supposed to climb. I really like that. And for youth here, be proud of yourself. This world, they will work on SDGs. For implementation of these SDGs, it really doesn't matter from which country you come. They need you. They need you now. Any idea you have, just implement it. Just be a voice. Celebrate your accomplishments. These accomplishments give you the confidence. The confidence help you to get over your fear. And that is when you rock the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Freshta. That was really inspiring. I think we have a couple of minutes for some questions from the floor. Yes? Yeah.
Can you put your question again, please? Yes?
Myself, I work hard, really, to be honest. I'm coming from minorities group. And being a woman and also being a minorities group, you need to work hard twice or maybe 10 times more. And I never relied on someone else to help me. I tried to have the knowledge to speak up and just get the opportunities. The job I found, I just found the job I went to website and I applied, I went through the interview and I got it. And the scholarship I got, it was a special scholarship being given to me by US Embassy. And when they came to know about this and commenting I do, they gave me another opportunity. They invited me to the United States to a women leadership program. And through that program, I was introduced to Peace School in Spain. I went there for a month. This is the opportunity that I have been given. And I'm very thankful. And there are other women that they are working hard and they are even achieving more than me. We have brave women. They are in parliament. We have women, I told you, they are doing ski and they got 2 scholarships to study in Europe. What I mean is, we shouldn't rely on someone else. We need to work hard. In Afghanistan, I just forgot to mention about the challenges I face. Our social structure is very different. I need to consider the culture, the mindset and belief of the people. They don't like to see Afghan women with the sports clothes. Actually, what we do is outdoor, it is completely different. It is, it's very dangerous. It can be very dangerous. For women, a young woman, going to the mountains and stay there for a month in the tent. There are Afghan women, they love to be in this thing, but they don't have the permission. But the good thing that helps women get empowered is their family. We have families that are open-minded. They let their daughters get these kind of opportunities, like my father. He is illiterate. My mom too. But why they giving me this opportunity? It really, we say that education to get open-minded, but we have still people they don't have education. But they believe on you. My father, my parents, they believe in me.
Thank you so much for your awesome and awe-inspiring address, in fact. I would like to know, after Malala Yousafzai received the Nobel Peace Prize, do you see any positive changes happened in Afghanistan for the women?
Actually, I didn't get the question. I'm so sorry.
After Malala Yousafzai,
okay,
she received the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
Do you think any positive change happened in Afghanistan for the women? Do you see any positive change? Or she encouraged the women of Afghanistan in real sense?
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't see in the government. Actually, I see difference that girls in age of her, they decided to select Malala as their role model. I see that, and we are exemplifying Malala in our speech in 8th of March that we are talking about International Women's Day. We really appreciate what Malala did, and actually I meet her when I was in the States. Yeah, and she is a great role model even for myself. She was working and talking about education, that it should happen, and that, that accident, that big it was a very big shock for all of us that happened for her. But we think everything is possible. You know, what she did is like us going to the peak of the mountain. Yeah. And I think going to the mountain where you have threat of people who are against you. You don't have access to security over there. This is like that. And that is why my heart is really close to the mountain, because when we believe we believe when we are on the top of the mountain, we shouted for peace and greatness in Afghanistan. And that time we will be role models too. And actually some of our girls, they are already role models.
Thank you very much, Freshta. You're really a good role model. We
Thank
need
you.
this kind of... And I think time is up, and I would very much like to thank the panel for a very rich discussion and a lot of food for thoughts. I think a conclusion from my side is that the message was very clear here, that we are all part, men and women, we are all part of the same structure, the same behavior, the same history, and we are bringing up our children with role models, with idols. Boys and girls have different kind of idols. So we need a minds change. We need all of us to change our minds, and it's not enough with the incremental change. We need the transformative change, and men must also be part of this. We definitely need representation of women on all levels, especially in Parliament, and we need a roadmap. I think that was a good idea. With push and pull, how do we get there? What shall we do? And again, good role models as Freshta here. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much to the panel for that extremely interesting discussion. Buses will be leaving to your hotels or to the